Hello, this is Colonial Puppet, and this is episode 1 of what I hope to be a multiple-part series exploring this Macintosh Plus computer. And what I mean by explore is basically just going over a brief history of the computer, going over the components of the computer, exploring the early version of Mac OS that's installed on the external SCSI hard drive that this computer came with, as well as any repairs that this computer will need and light cosmetic restoration work. In this particular episode, I hope to go over how I came to own this particular Macintosh Plus, as well as give a brief history of the Macintosh Plus in general, go over its specs, as well as outline any issues that this computer may have and issues that I'm going to look out for. And I also hope to boot up the computer and view the OS and maybe get some more information on the past life that this computer had. Okay, to start off with some history, the Macintosh Plus was introduced on January 16th, 1986 at $2,599, which is equivalent to about $5,940 today. It was discontinued October 15th, 1990 with the introduction of the Macintosh Classic, making it the longest running Macintosh up until 2013 with the second generation Mac Pro, also known as the Trash Can Mac. The Macintosh SE was actually released a couple years after the Macintosh Plus in 1987, but the Plus remained as a cheaper alternative. It was the first Macintosh released after Steve Jobs was forced out of Apple in 1985, and the Macintosh Plus came in a beige color, but later introduced the platinum gray color. The Macintosh Plus featured a Motorola 68000 CPU running at a whopping 8 MHz. Came standard with 1 MB of RAM, but was expandable to up to 4 MB, making it the first user upgradable Mac to use SIM memory modules as opposed to RAM chips soldered directly to the logic board. It featured a crisp 512 by 342 9-inch black and white display. It had a 3.5-inch double-sided 800K floppy disk drive. It was the first Macintosh to feature a SCSI port for external devices such as external hard drives, external tape drives, and other peripherals. The Macintosh Plus came with a new keyboard with a numeric keypad, though it was similar to the design of the original Macintosh keyboard. It was also the last Macintosh to include the DE9 connector for the mouse and the proprietary phone cord-like connector for the keyboard, which was replaced on the Macintosh SE with the Apple Desktop Bus port. I picked up this Macintosh Plus and all the peripherals you see with it on eBay for about $130. After shipping, it came to about $150. That bought me the Macintosh Plus CPU itself, the third-party CMS external SCSI hard drive. That also got me the Apple Mouse 2E. It came with the original Macintosh keyboard and not the Macintosh Plus keyboard with the numeric keypad. The model number is M0110. And yeah, that's what $150 bought me. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is go through each component separately and list off things that I want to accomplish with each component, including issues that this old equipment runs into when they're nearing 30 years of age. This computer's at least 30 years, and as such they tend to run into issues as they get older in life. One of them being the clock battery goes bad in these computers, the CMOS battery, and thankfully for the first couple of compact Macs, the CMOS battery was kept in this little compartment in the back. It's actually part of the analog board, this little compartment. There was a battery in here. I took it out because that's like the first thing you should probably do with these compact Macs is find the CMOS battery and get rid of it, because over the years those will leak battery acid all over the inside of the machine. This one started to leak, but it wasn't that bad. So there is some corrosion in here. You probably can't see it, but I'll give you a close-up of it later. The first couple compact Macs had it here. The later models, like the Macintosh SE and the models after that, the CMOS battery was moved to the logic board. It was first soldered on, but then they added like a little just regular socket later down the road. So those are a little worse because if they leak, obviously they'll get battery acid all over the logic board. It's kind of separated from everything. It's still on the analog board and it can leak down onto the logic board, but it's a little more separated, which is better. So I want to deal with that corrosion possibly, get some vinegar, soak that part of the board in vinegar, and honestly just getting rid of the battery did wonders for the computer. I also want to check to see if this has a signed back casing, so I'm not going to open it now, but the Macintosh, the compact Mac, is kind of divided into two parts: the front bezel in like this back casing. This whole back casing slides off, and on the inside of this back, they molded the first couple of units off the assembly line with engravements of the Mac team's signatures, including Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, Andy Hertzfeld. Those guys, their names are on the back of the first, I think, 10,000 Macintoshes of each like variant. So like the original 128K, 512K Plus. I think they did it all the way up until the SE, and then the Macintoshes after that, they got rid of the signatures on the back of the casing. So we'll check to see if this is a signed Macintosh. Next, we're gonna test, replace, fix the 800K floppy drive. So I have booted this computer up, and I didn't hear any activity from the floppy drive, which was fine because it had an external hard drive, and that's where the OS is saved. All the files are saved. But I do want a working 800K floppy disk drive, so I'm gonna test that out, clean it out, maybe lubricate some of the moving parts, see if we could get that to work. They are known to have an issue with a certain gear in like the motor of the floppy drive disintegrates over time. This computer might be a victim of that. The next thing I want to do is inspect for and replace analog capacitors. So on the analog board has capacitors that go bad over time. So I want to look for any bulging capacitors that need to be replaced. Hopefully there's no leaking capacitors, but if they're near the end of their life and they're bulging, I want to get those replaced as soon as possible. It's something that you want to do eventually, regardless, because like I said, they're nearing 30 years old. They're going to not live forever, so I want to get those replaced as soon as possible. Next is inspect for cracking solder joints. This is an interesting one because this is a product of Steve Jobs, and he hated fans, so these computers ran hot in their day. The vents on the top, they thought hot air rises, so put some vents on the top so that the hot air rises out of the computer. But that wasn't enough, and as a result, these computers ran hot, and over time, the solder joints on the analog board start to dry and crack, and that can affect the picture you get on the screen. A very common issue is you won't get a picture on the screen, and if you hit the side of the computer, the screen will come back to life. It might flicker a bit. If you wait, sometimes it comes back to life. So that's the result of solder joints drying up and cracking on some specific parts on the analog board that kind of mess with the connection of the CRT to the analog board and the analog board to the logic board. So we'll inspect the solder joints to see if this computer is suffering from that issue. Normally what you look at is on the solder joint a like little halo-like crack. The next thing I want to look out for is screen burn-in, and basically what that is over time CRTs in general have this issue. If you leave a static image up on the screen for prolonged amounts of time, the image will actually start to burn into the display. So like a lot of computers in the education or business market that just kind of sat there doing one task, displaying one program over the course of its life, that program will start to burn into the screen or the image of that program. So like things like taskbars, menus, cursors, even things like that. If it's in one place and it stays there for a while, it'll burn into the screen. I haven't really had any issues with that so far. This computer looks fine too, but I am going to take a flashlight or a UV light to the screen and look for any slight burn-in that this CRT might have. The next thing I want to do is find the production date, which honestly I can do right now. If you flip it, so the earlier Macintosh models, the 128K and the 512K, had their serial number right here. This one has it on the bottom, and we can actually read this right now and see when this was made. This was made in 1987. The serial number is F7063PNM0001A. We only really need to know the first three numbers. 7 means it was made in 1987 out of the 706. The 06 is the 6th week of 1987. So this was made in February of 1987. The next thing we want to do is find the amount of RAM installed on this computer. Now, again, turn it around. It says Macintosh Plus, 1 megabyte. However, I was looking on the files that were saved on the external hard drive of this computer, and the person who previously owned this had this computer and was using this computer up until the late 90s. So hopefully they tried to get as much life out of this computer as possible, and as a result upgraded to the 4 megabytes of RAM, the full 4 megabytes, because like I said, Macintosh Plus was the first really easily user upgradable Macintosh with the SIM modules as opposed to soldered on RAM chips. And then the last thing I'm going to do to this computer is light restoration work, blow out any dust that has built up over the 30 years of this computer's life, clean the exterior. There's sticker residue and scuffs and scratches all over it, so get some alcohol, get some baking soda, rub out those scuffs and scratches and whatnot, and maybe retro bright this computer. Now this is close to its original color, so that might not be necessary, but if I again turn it on its back, you can see this is a little bit lighter than the parts of the computer that were exposed to light. So maybe a little retro bright might do this computer some good. Moving on to the keyboard, the first thing I want to do is actually figure out what's wrong with the keyboard. According to the eBay seller, this keyboard, its keystrokes are not registering on the Macintosh Plus, so that could be one of several issues. It could be an issue with the keyboard itself. Hopefully it's an issue just with the proprietary phone cord-like connector, because I do have a second phone cord connector. Could be a problem with the computer itself, or an issue with the port on the logic board. The next thing I want to do is clean it, obviously, blow out any debris and dirt that is built up in under the keys and whatnot, because this is a 30-year-old keyboard. Definitely take it apart, clean the casing, and let's figure out when this was made. The 17th week of 1987, with A717 being the first couple digits of the serial number. So moving on to the mouse, there's not really much I want to do with this, given that it's in really good condition. Doesn't look like it needs any retro bright. Just some light cleaning. Might take the trackball out and clean that lightly. I do want to help with the cable management though. This cord, I want to like coil it up nicely and maybe get one of those Velcro strap things that you can get for cables, and I think I do have some hiding somewhere. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Just some light cleaning and some cable management. And lastly, the external SCSI hard drive. I want to clean the case. I don't know if it's picking up on the camera, but it's pretty dirty, as well as clean the cables it came with, the SCSI cable and the power cord. I want to replace the rubber feet because I don't know if you can see that, but it's missing a rubber foot on this side, so there's only 3. I want to replace those with something I could find at the hardware store that best matches the ones that it came with. Also want to blow out any dust and just clean it up, make it look pretty, and that's pretty much all I want to do with the hard drive. Alright, so as you can see, I have the computer all hooked up and ready to go, and basically what I'm going to do next is honestly anything I can without actually having to take the computer apart, so things like checking for screen burn-in, checking to see if the floppy disk drive works, and then just exploring the OS once the computer and the hard drive are booted up. So first things first, let's clean the screen, and this is basically to get rid of anything that could be mistaken for screen burn-in. Screen's all nice and clean. And the next thing I'm going to do is hit the lights. Then I'm going to take my flashlight and basically check to see if I can see anything such as windows. I'm looking for icons, menu bars, and honestly the screen looks pretty good, so it doesn't look like there's any real screen burn-in, which is nice. Alright, so the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to test to see if the floppy disk drive works. I have this Macintosh Plus, a guided tour floppy disk. I'm just gonna turn on the computer. I'm not gonna turn on the hard drive. The computer and the hard drive both have their own power switches. If I turn the computer on only, it'll give the boot up chime. We'll wait for the screen to come on. Alright, so it's asking for a floppy disk, and we have one right here, the Macintosh Plus, a guided tour. We're gonna insert it in the floppy disk drive and see if we hear any life from this disk drive. And it looks like the disk drive is dead, which honestly, I'm not surprised. This is okay because we do have a replacement 800K disk drive from another Macintosh Plus The good thing though is that the motor actually worked. It was able to spit this back out. Like I said, these suffer from issues with the gears in the motor itself, and it looks like this computer isn't suffering from that. So honestly, the disk drive might just need to be cleaned and lubed up, which we can do when we take the computer apart. The next thing we're going to do is boot up the hard drive. Alright, so the hard drive is booting up. So not bad so far. There's no screen burn-in. The floppy disk drive isn't reading disks, but it is ejecting them correctly. So there's nothing mechanically wrong with the motor. It's just something with the read head, or maybe there's some moving parts that need to be oiled up, or maybe the read head needs to be cleaned. So now we're going to play the wait game. It takes a while to boot up. And once this computer has booted up to the desktop, we can find out some things such as how much RAM is installed on the machine and how much the external hard drive holds in terms of storage. So right now I'm going to adjust the camera so that you see only the computer screen. Alright, so as you can see, the computer successfully booted to the desktop, and there are a lot of icons. One of them is titled games, which I'm excited to explore. There's Super Paint, ClarisWorks, which is like a word processing program, a folder titled Creative Writing, and a bunch of ClarisWorks documents, abstracts, references. So it seems like there's a lot of schoolwork and a lot of job application work on the computer. So whoever owned this was trying to get into school or trying to get jobs, which is nice. They named their hard drive Sal 9000. So this is actually the hard drive icon. I'm not sure what they changed it to. Normally that would come up with like a little hard drive icon. They changed it to whatever this is. It's kind of hard to tell. Going to the Apple icon, let's click on About This Macintosh. And you don't just click with the Macintosh, you actually have to hold down the mouse button. So if you can hear me clicking, so you actually have to hold it down and then hover over what you want to click and then let go. And thankfully, they have the full 4 megabytes of RAM, total memory 4096K. This Macintosh has System Software 7.1 of the Mac OS, copyright 1983 to 1992. You guys can read. Let's open this. Alright, so this is the hard drive itself, and as you can see, there's a lot of schoolwork on it, biographies, mentor applications, midterm essays, poem projects, a resume for a scholarship. So there's a lot of personal information, which is why no matter how old your computer is, always get rid of your personal information, because people will find it. And here we could find out how much this external hard drive holds in terms of memory. Up top, it says it has 26.3 megabytes on the disk. 26.3 is a weird, I don't know if this is a 25 megabyte hard drive or if it was a 30 megabyte hard drive, and it's just not a very good hard drive. We'll look at the bottom of the external hard drive and see if there's a label that says how much this was supposed to hold, because right now the computer is only seeing 26.3 megabytes. And another thing I can do is the screen is very dark, but you can actually change the background. Even though this is a monochrome screen, you can change the pattern that it shows. Alright, and yep, there it is, desktop pattern. So let's see which ones we should do. Ooh, I like that. Let's try that. Can change how fast the cursor blinks when you're typing, which is kind of cool. Can change if it's military time or 12-hour time on the clock. So right now it's set at September 28th, 2004. Let's change it to current time. Alrighty, there we go. So now we're gonna actually test to see if we can get the keyboard working. Alright, so right now I opened up ClarisWorks, which I was actually wrong about. It does a lot more than word processing, it seems. It had options to paint, it had options to make spreadsheets, so it's like a multi-purpose production application that also just happens to do word processing, among other things. We have a Word document open, or a Claris document open, and I am typing on the keyboard, but nothing is coming up. However, I do have a spare connector for the keyboard, the phone cord connector. Hopefully the issue is with this cord and not with the keyboard or with the connector on the logic board of the Macintosh Plus itself. It would be a lot easier if this was the issue, so I'm going to swap this out with the other one. Alright, so the keyboard is hooked in with the new cable, and let's see if it works. Hoping it does. So it looks like the keyboard is not working, and it looks like the issue is not with these connectors. So next episode, I'm gonna have to inspect that further. And next episode, we're just gonna take the computer apart, inspect for any leaking anywhere, any corrosion, any bulging capacitors, things like that. We're also gonna discharge the CRT, and I'll show you how to do that safely. And yeah, while we're inside, we can look and see if there's any visible issues with the keyboard connector on the logic board itself. We can even swap out the logic board with a working one and see if the keyboard still doesn't work, in which case then this is a functional logic board inside this machine and the issue is with the keyboard itself. So yep, check out all that in part 2. This has been part 1, and other than that, this has been Colonial Puppet. Have a nice day.